Okay, everyone can hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, how about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, then we'll just we'll do it like this. Okay, we're gonna start with just like this, so we don't. Okay, okay. Hopefully, we have the source sheet. We are starting. We're looking at chapter 6, verse 13. Chapter 6, verse 13. If someone could find it and just announce the page. So we're going to be looking at something slightly different than usual, I think. But it's funny because every week I try to go over practically all of the Midrash Rabbah on the weekly portion. So last week in Parashat Shmot, there was such a wealth of Midrash. My biggest difficulty was figuring out what not to talk about, because it really was just so much. This week's Parsha, I actually had tremendous difficulty because I found one thing that I really, really wanted to talk about, but as you'll see soon, it's really small. But I think I found something that connects to it, and I think it will take us somewhere nice and somewhere significant. Okay, so we're in chapter 6, verse 13. Someone want to announce the page? Okay, page 320. So I'll be reading it from my translation. And it says, and as usual, we're going to read the pasuk, read the verse, and then we're going to try to ask some questions, and we'll see how the Midrash answers them. Okay, the verse says the following. Let's actually start from slightly before in verse 10. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Come speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he send the children of Israel from his land." Moshe spoke before Hashem, saying, "Behold, the children of Israel have not listened to me, so how will Pharaoh listen to me, and I have sealed lips?" Okay, now we're coming to the verse we're interested in. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron and commanded them regarding the children of Israel and regarding Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to take the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And the next verse says, these were the heads of their fathers' houses, the sons of Reuven, and then it goes on for the next, 20 verses to talk about all the lineage and of the 12 tribes. So let's read again verse 13. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron and commanded them regarding the children of Israel and regarding Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to take the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Questions?
The expansion to Aaron, Hashem was just speaking directly to Moshe, and now Aaron's included.
So he's saying up until now Hashem is speaking directly to Moshe. Why is Aaron suddenly included? Okay. Other question? Good question. Actually, I would have to check to see. Are you sure that's true? Are you sure? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not 100% sure. Is this the first time that he's speaking to both of them?
No, I'm just suggesting from the verses you had us read in advance. Previous to that, but just those two verses before this one, was a conversation between Hashem and Moshe.
Okay, so you're saying what happened 1 second ago, meaning the previous verse, Hashem is speaking to Moshe. What happened that suddenly Hashem switches and is speaking to both of them? Okay, right. Great point. Not one we're going to talk about. We'll talk about something similar, but we're not going to answer that specific question. Other questions? Yes.
He spoke and commanded.
So it says he spoke and he commanded. Okay, so what's the question?
I just spoke. Probably he's telling them something.
So you're saying what?
To listen to command to take out. Probably he explained something.
So he's saying, why is there a repetition that he spoke to them and commanded them? Why doesn't it just say Hashem commanded Moshe and Aaron, or he spoke to Moshe and Aaron? Okay, good. Other questions? These are all good questions, just not the one I'm looking for. Yes?
It looks like there is Pharaoh and there is king.
Yeah.
That's the first one. And the second one, it can be read, we can read it different regarding Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to take children. It's like Pharaoh, king of Egypt, has to help to take children of Israel from Egypt.
Okay, very nice. Very nice observation. The observation is, if you look at the way the verse, in the most literal way, the way the pasuk is speaking, it almost seems as if Pharaoh is going to be the one who's going to take the Jewish people out of Israel. Okay.
And plus there is king and there is Pharaoh.
Then he says, "Come speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt." So let's see if that works in the Hebrew.
I guess the question is,
what?
Why do we have to be told that Pharaoh is king of Egypt?
Oh, okay. Now we're getting closer. Now we're getting closer to what the Midrash is going to talk about. It says the question was, why does it have to continuously say Pharaoh, king of Egypt? Why does it constantly have to? Isn't it just enough to come and say Pharaoh? Don't we know that Pharaoh is the king of Egypt? It has to continuously give us his title. Just say to the king of Egypt, or say to Pharaoh. So, okay, good. Anyone got anything else?
Well, first of all, it's very repetitive, and you're probably just wasting words in this verse. You could have said that basically the whole verse could be half of what it is. But also, the ask is to take Jews from Egypt. So basically to expel Jews from Egypt versus to set them free. Because they could say, okay, they're oppressed, so just go and tell Egypt to Pharaoh to let them go or let them be.
Okay, Oleg, you're getting, and I'm going to repeat. Don't worry, Alex. I promise I'll repeat what Oleg said. But you're getting very, very close to what I think is the real issue with the verse here. So Oleg was saying, if I understood correctly what you're saying, that the verse seems very repetitive. It seems to have a lot of extra words that are unnecessary. And I think more importantly, you're pointing out that he's saying that instead of, it should say, the connotation or the tune or of the verse should be to set them free. If you're talking to Pharaoh, it should be, the phrase in the verse is to take them, right, out of Egypt. Pharaoh's not taking them out of Egypt. Whatever role Pharaoh's going to play here, if it's really being, I think this is where you're going, is that it should say, if this is something that is going to be spoken to Pharaoh, to set them free, or at least to let them go, to send them away. But the phrase, to take them out, Pharaoh's not taking them out of anywhere. So I'm gonna step up Oleg's question, take it one step further. What in this verse is even is aimed at Pharaoh at all? Pharaoh it doesn't seem to be the target of anything in this verse, because what is being commanded here? Look at the next verse. The verse says, commanded them regarding the children of Israel and regarding Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to take the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And because it said regarding the children of Israel, it's going to say, these were the heads of their fathers' houses. Who are the children of Israel who need to be taken out? Reuben and his sons and his descendants, and Shimon and his descendants. In this verse itself, Pharaoh why is he even mentioned?
But isn't it because in the line 2 previous, Moshe was supposed to talk to Pharaoh to get him to allow the children of Israel to leave? So isn't that why it's regarding Pharaoh?
So you're saying Hashem commanded them regarding the children of Israel and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to take. Then we go back to Oleg's question, what's the role of to take them out of Egypt?
Right.
You're not going to Pharaoh to tell him to take them out of Egypt. Okay.
To allow Moshe to take them out of Egypt.
Okay.
Speak to Pharaoh to allow Moshe to.
Okay. So it might be possible.
Awkward language.
No. It might be possible to make the words work, but something here is strange.
Yes.
So let's look at the Midrash. And you'll see that the translation over here in the source sheet is a better translation. And the reason it's a better translation is because I translated it. And not because I'm such a better translator, but because I translated it literally and not contextually to make sense. Meaning both the translation I'm looking in my book and you're looking in your book is a translation that was made that did not do it literally word for word, because a lot of times when you translate a sentence word for word, it doesn't end up sounding logical. And in order to make it make sense, the translator in both my version and your version put the word regarding in there, which is why it suddenly does make sense. But in the Hebrew, that word does not appear. If you were to translate this verse literally, it would appear as I put it in. So Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron and commanded them to the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt. That's what the words in Hebrew actually say, to take out the Israelites from the land of Egypt. And then the question becomes a lot more obvious. What is the phrase Pharaoh, king of Egypt doing in this sentence? Because that is how it appears in Hebrew. So let's see the Midrash. Remember, we always try to see, is the Midrash answering the question? How is it answering the question? And are there any difficulties that arise from this answer? Let's read the Midrash. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to them, treat him with respect and show respect to the kingship, even though I need to exact justice upon him. And that is what Moshe did, as it says in Shemot 11, and all of your servants will come down to me. And he didn't say it about him, rather only about his servants, even though Moshe should have said, you and your king himself, as it says, and Pharaoh arose in the night with all his courtiers and all the Egyptians, because there was a loud cry in Egypt, for there was no house where there was not someone dead. Therefore, he did not publicize him in order to show respect to the kingship. Okay, someone want to take a shot at what is the Midrash saying? Okay, no, let's not go with deeper meaning yet. What is the Midrash actually saying that is going on here? Why was the phrase Pharaoh, king of Egypt, put into this verse?
And it sounds like Hashem could have just told Moshe to take the Jews out of Egypt, and that could have been accomplished without Pharaoh being involved. But out of respect to Pharaoh, somehow we're get permission from Pharaoh to be able to do this.
Ooh, I think I think you might be taking it further than what the Midrash itself even means. The answer that was said was, it seems as if originally Pharaoh himself was completely unnecessary in the process of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, and that the only reason why Moshe was sent to Pharaoh at all was in order to show him respect. I think you're taking the idea that the Midrash is saying, but I think you're taking it one step further than the Midrash itself. I think the Midrash is saying, yeah, someone want to go ahead? No, I thought someone was gonna. The Midrash seems to be saying yes, someone has their hand up. Yes.
Yes, Rabbi, I believe that what we actually have to see here in the Midrash is that it says Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He's actually saying you have to recognize that this is the king of Egypt. You have to approach him with the respect of the throne, not just come to him and say, "Hey, man, we want to come out." You have to actually go to him with the respect that is due to the throne, so that you approach him with the respect that's due to him.
Right. So I think that's exactly what the Midrash is doing, which is it makes a point of saying Pharaoh, king of Egypt. If you go back to the fact that it seems like, why do we need to remind us, who this guy is? Of course we know who he is. And also, even though this specific statement that Hashem is saying to Moshe and Aaron is going to be followed by going through the descendants of the 12 tribes, really has nothing to do with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Even so, the Midrash says, Hashem made a point of saying, even this aspect, which has nothing to do with Pharaoh, I'm going to mention him anyway. Why? To show respect. Even though he has nothing to do with this part, and maybe, like you said, maybe he has very little to do, ultimately, with anything, since he did have choice, he didn't have choice, no matter what he did, it was going to happen. Still, we should treat him with respect because he's the king. Okay, so now we go back to our question. Does the Midrash answer the question, what is the purpose of Pharaoh appearing in the verse? Does the Midrash answer it? Does it answer the question? Yes. Does it answer in a way that is satisfactory to us? Not so much. Why? What is difficult for us about the answer the Midrash gives? And remember, once you identify the logical or moral problems or textual problems of the answer that a commentary gives, that is when you understand, this is the assumption that the Midrash or the commentator is working from within, and therefore for the Midrash it's not difficult. For the commentator, but that's where you discover the depth of the commentary, of its assumptions, of the mindset it's coming from, the world perspective it's coming from. So why are we not comfortable, or what does not sit well with us with this answer?
Pharaoh is evil, which he is. It's similar to saying, I know it's extreme to make that analogy, but I think it's still a fair analogy. Hitler was elected as the prime minister of Germany. Let's give him respect because he was the prime minister. If he was evil, let's not respect him. And I would put Pharaoh and Hitler in the same boat. They were both oppressive with Jewish people. Why do we want to respect Hitler? Why would we want to respect Pharaoh? Okay.
When you started off your question, it's a question I was ready for, and I had a good answer. But I will. Don't worry, Alex. I promise I will. But then your analogy is a good one. It's an excellent one. The question was, Pharaoh is evil. Why do we have to? He's evil. Why is Hashem giving him any type of respect? That question I could deal with a little easier. But then the question turned into, Hitler. What, we're going to give respect to Hitler just because he was elected? Hey, by the way, it's not as if Pharaoh was elected. Right? So even more so, So what, we're going to, you expect the Jews during the Holocaust to give respect? Because the Midrash does go on and say, not only did Hashem, showed respect to Pharaoh by, using the phrase king of Egypt, and not like that devil, that murderer. He didn't say Pharaoh, right? He said, the king, and put him in a verse that he didn't belong in, just to teach Moshe to be respectful to the king. But the Midrash goes on to say that Moshe indeed did it, right? Well, in what way did Moshe show respect to the king? Because when Moshe stood before Pharaoh and said, and threatened about what's going to happen, or forewarned the plague of Makat Bechorot, and he said, and this is what's going to happen. He meant to say, you're all going to run through the night looking for us, begging us to leave. But he didn't want to say to Pharaoh, you will get up in the middle of the night and beg for us to leave, because that's disrespectful. Even though that is what happened, Pharaoh did get up and Pharaoh did, beg them to leave. Even so, Moshe said, your servants will chase us and beg us to leave. So Moshe followed Hashem's example of, and your question is a very good one, which is, it's like what a Jew in the Holocaust was, when he was hoping for the end of World War II and the end of the Holocaust, he should say, well, I hope all the Germans will lose and die, but not say, I hope Hitler, Yamach Shemo, will, burn a million deaths. No, that's disrespectful to Hitler. It's a very good question. I don't have, at this point, a satisfactory answer, but I did anticipate this. I didn't anticipate the Hitler example, but I anticipated that even without the Hitler example, it's like, you don't need the example of Hitler. You read the stories of Pharaoh, even in the verses themselves, of murdering babies, drowning, thousands or hundreds of thousands of babies for decades. You can't get more evil than that. That's in the verses themselves. You go to the Midrashim and you see the descriptions of Pharaoh. It's definitely up there with the most gruesome atrocities in history. But even without that, the pshat of the verses are horrible.
I have a theory, though.
Please.
No, if you distance yourself from the narrative and from the spiritual aspect of it, and you think of this as a generational thing, or something that it's nations and a movement of people, one thing that you need to establish is the legitimacy of the ruler. Because if you all of a sudden somebody comes and says, Pharaoh is not a king, he's nobody, follow me, I'll take you out, then the obvious question will be from the people, like, who are you, really? Like, who made you the leader, and who's giving you commands? And then God needs to speak to all of them to say, this is the leader, follow him.
Right. Okay, so we have two answers being offered here. One from Oleg, who's sitting in Toronto, and one from my dear friend Yair Ben Ishai, who's sitting, I don't know where, but he's watching us on Facebook. So he also just wrote an answer. So I'll offer both. Oleg is saying, look, it's not necessarily a moral statement. This has to do with politics. Or this has to do with functionality in politics. If you start not recognizing, the fact that Pharaoh is the king, until Pharaoh, as in his capacity as the king of Egypt, until he weighs in, he has a role to play in this. Good, bad, doesn't make a difference. He is an element in this just by the mere fact that he is the leader of the Egyptian people. And you can come and say, well, because he's an evil person, we're not going to recognize that he's the king. Yeah, but if you just decide to leave, he's the one who's going to be chasing you. He's the one who's going to be sending the armies. And if Hashem, needs the Jewish people to see and to feel, that the king of Egypt, of the supreme power of the world at the time, is bending and breaking, and there needs to be a recognition that this is the king of Egypt. And you can't recognize the king of Egypt without there being some kind of respect. It's not necessarily a moral statement. It's a political, pragmatic, realist political stance. So that's I think the answer, the perspective that Oleg is offering. And Yair Ben Ishai wrote to me that the Jews themselves are not the ones who necessarily have to give respect to Pharaoh, but Hashem can. But the issue with that is the Midrash comes and says that it seems to be that Hashem was trying to teach Moshe a lesson, saying, you shall treat him with respect. And then it says, and Moshe followed suit. Moshe actually did. Moshe followed Hashem's example and instruction, and later on was careful and not to gloat in Pharaoh's face and say, you're gonna beg me. You see, we'll see. You're gonna beg us to leave. No, your servants will. So that dichotomy, it's Hashem versus the Jewish people, doesn't seem to be found, at least in the Midrash. Okay, I want to continue. By the way, I think Oleg's answer, I think it's a good one, but I think there might be more to it. Yeah.
If I could just one question on Oleg's suggestion. I mean, didn't Moshe already prove himself because of convincing the Jewish people, the Israelites, that he was communicated to by Hashem? He had those secret words. I mean,
and therefore what?
They knew from where Moshe was coming that he would be able to lead. He was given the stature of leading by God. So he didn't have to prove what makes him the person who could take them out.
So you're saying that Moshe didn't need, or the Jewish people didn't need Moshe's kind of standing before Pharaoh to recognize his legitimacy as a leader. I'm not so sure that's true. Meaning they second guessed him over and over again. Obviously we know this from later in the desert, but also, we'll see if you continue in the verses from where we are now. You'll see, right, that the elders of Israel came with him, but by the time they reached the palace, all the elders vanished.
Well, I appreciate the question, Tim, but he had set his authority from where it came, from God, to them, I thought.
Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it stayed constant. I don't know to say that it didn't.
Right. But the other question I have, I guess, is, was Hashem trying to say, I want to somehow work through natural means? I mean, I know the plagues were hardly natural, but he wanted to do it. Okay, I do want to continue, so I'll just answer quickly. You're asking, does this show that Hashem wanted to operate through natural means? I'm not sure how. Maybe this is connected to that. By the way, you made a statement that is not so definitive. You made a definitive statement that I'm not so sure is true. You said obviously the plagues are not through natural means. Quite a few commentators claim that they were, or claim that they could be. Essentially.
Yes.
Which would strengthen my point about.
Yes, but let's go to the next midrash. Okay.
Yeah.
The next midrash is actually 3 different small midrashim that I think that will offer us a phenomenally simple but deep truth, which will also, I think, help us understand the previous midrash better. When we come to verse 7, chapter 7, if you guys want to open up, chapter 7, verse 19. Chapter 7, verse 19. It's the beginning, as the plague of blood is about to be exacted, is about to be launched or released. So it says the following. Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt. What is the obvious question? Very good. Why Aaron? Why not Moshe? Right? Known question, but it is a very, very obvious. It's the kind of question that has to be asked. Why is Moshe not the one himself who's going to be performing the physical act that will begin the plague? Says the Midrash. And Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, take your rod and hold out your arm over the waters of Egypt. Rabbi Tanchum said, why were the waters not struck by Moshe? The Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, the water that guarded you when you were tossed into the river, it is not just that it be struck by your hand. It is not just, meaning it is not, the word in Hebrew is din, it is not justice. It is against justice. Okay? It is not just that it be struck by your hand. For the life of you, they shall not be struck by anyone but Aaron. What is, okay, so again, is the Midrash answering the question, why did Moshe not perform the act of launching the plague of blood? Yes. What is the answer it's giving? It would be an act of ungratefulness for Moshe to strike the water. Okay. Did the Midrash answer the question? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it understandable? Yes. What is our issue with the answer? What is our obvious issue with the answer?
Why the water has to be struck anyway if this water saved the life?
What? Say that again?
Why the water has to be struck if this water saved the life of Moshe?
Saying, why does the water need to be struck if he saved Moshe's life? Okay. Anyone have any other questions on our answer?
I mean, does striking water hurt water? Like,
Yeah. Right. That I think that's the more obvious answer. It's so obvious it's almost silly. What does it mean? What does it mean that if Moshe strikes the water is going to say, "Hey, you ungrateful brat, I protected you and you're hitting me"? I mean, what kind of
It's a very pagan approach to Nile, which they worshipped as one of the gods.
So you're saying if you had an Egyptian perspective that saw the Nile as a deity, then maybe you would have that kind of outlook. I don't know, because even the Egyptians who viewed the Nile as a deity, I don't think it meant we see later on that Pharaoh is going to the Nile to relieve himself. They didn't, it's not they didn't use the Nile to wash their clothes, to do all kinds of other things. I would assume that once Moshe, especially once he now has this direct relationship with Hashem, with God, even if to some degree he maybe was influenced by the Egyptian outlook on the Nile, maybe that by this time he would have shaken it.
What I'm saying is not so much what the Egyptian thought of Nile, but the whole explanation about why you should not be striking water is very paganistic.
So you're adding to the question. He says this concept of being careful how you treat the Nile or inanimate objects at all.
It's like it has. It's a living thing.
Right. It reeks. He's saying, why would the Midrash play in to something that has a very strong odor of pagan Egypt, which treated the Nile like a living entity. So he's saying why? Right. So the first question, I guess, was, okay, come on, this is just silly, treating the Nile as if it's going to be insulted. And Oleg, you're saying, well, it's even more serious than that, because this is the Midrash seems to be playing in to the idol worship and the pagan outlook that the Torah seems to be trying to push away from. Okay. So just to kind of add to this, let's read the next two midrashim that basically say the exact same thing. Okay. So in chapter 8 in the psukim, in the verses, chapter 8 verse 1 comes the second plague, the plague of frogs, and says same exact thing. Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals, and raise up frogs. Right? And jump to verse 12, chapter 8 verse 12, come to the third plague. And he goes on to say, Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the land. Right? So again, the first three plagues, Moshe is told, tell Aaron to do this. So it's not just that Aaron is told to do it. Moshe is told, you are not going to be doing it. Aaron's going to be doing it. Okay? But from that point on, already Moshe is involved. So let's look at the next two paragraphs in our source sheet. And Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, hold out your arm with the rod over the rivers and bring up the frogs on the land of Egypt. Rabbi Tanchum said, why were the waters not struck by Moshe? The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moshe, the water that guarded you when you were tossed into the river shall not be struck by your hand. Almost identical. Okay, it's interesting to try to see why the language is not identical. It's pretty close. Okay, it just seems to be a slimmer version. It doesn't appear right after another. I just put them. In the Midrash itself, they appear several paragraphs apart. You come to the last paragraph. Hashem said to Moshe, say to Aaron, hold out your rod and strike the dust of the earth, and it shall turn to lice. Rabbi Tanchum, same person. It's the same rabbi all three times. Rabbi Tanchum said, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moshe, dirt which protected you when you killed the Egyptian, it is not just that will be struck by your hand. Therefore, these three plagues were done by Aaron. Also over here, if we had the time, we'd look at the minor differences. Over here, the first two, it uses the verb of guarded, lishmor, whereas over here it says to protect, which is lehagen. So it would be interesting, just if you wanted to get into a little more, what's the difference between water guards and dirt protects? I don't know. I'm not sure but Rabbi Tanchum is saying all three, but each time he's changing the language a little bit. My theory is the reason why each time it sounds a little bit different, because he didn't say them all at the same time. I think this is a statement that he would say on occasion. This is a concept that he's repeating over and over and over again. And he seems to think this is a central idea to the first three plagues. That's why he's saying it again and again and again. And we go back to the question, why? It seems very, very childish. It's the kind of thing that when you hear it as a child, or when you tell this midrash to a child, you see, from here we learn, you shouldn't be ungrateful. And by the way, we said in our very first class about Midrash, that Midrash cannot be understood in two ways. It can be understood as a simple fairy tale style thing, stories that have a very simpleton, almost childish understanding, that in itself is also valuable sometimes. And there's another perspective of the Midrash that sees it as a highly, highly intelligent, intellectual, deep text that can also be understood on a simple level, but also has a depth to it. And I think, yes?
Sorry, are we trying to connect? They seem to be two very separate issues. The first one dealing with Paro and getting the Jewish people out of Egypt, and now these plagues. I guess there's commonality.
Okay, so here we go. You came and said there seems to be no connection between the first Midrash and these three, because the first one's dealing with Pharaoh, and these three are dealing with the plagues, or with the Nile. Now, but the truth is, I think you're wrong on both counts. I'll tell you why. What is the center, or more accurately, who is at the center of all four of these midrashim? Yes?
I kind of disagree. I think there is a commonality between all four. And all four is the concept of respect, whether it's deserving or not. And it's Moshe that needs to learn to be respectful.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. You're saying, well, it all has to do with about respect. But maybe, but the last three, they're not. We don't see the term respect. We see a different idea of don't do something which is unjust. It is unjust to be ungrateful. So it's not so much about respect, but I do agree with what you said. They are similar because the one who's at the center, who's the target of all these midrashim? Moshe, and Moshe's personality. And here's what I think is a very, very deep idea. Of course the Midrash knows that the Nile is not the Nile is an inanimate object. and it makes no difference. I mean, come on. If really this was about Moshe, not wanting the Nile to get hurt, then why would he tell Aaron, turn it into blood? Right? If it really was as childish as it sounds or it looks at first sight, then he would say, no, it's not right to turn the water into blood. Use a different plague. It's not that really the Rabbi Tanchum thinks that Moshe thought, or that Hashem thought, or that we think that the Nile will get insulted. But it's about teaching Moshe, and therefore us, I think something very, very deep, which is you have to be paying attention always to what the effect of your actions will have on your personality. It's okay if the Nile will be struck. Of course it's okay. It serves a great purpose. But Moshe's personality. Now, Moshe can feel indebted to the Nile, even if it doesn't mean he needs to go and say thank you. Meaning, being grateful and being respectful and having a sense of gratitude isn't just about being reciprocal. It's a certain mindset. It's a certain personality trait. And I think as Moshe becomes the leader of the Jewish people, and as we are through the Midrash, being taught what the focus of what one of the most, I think, fundamental ideas of Torah is, it's about creating a certain kind of human being. And it doesn't make a difference that I can't repay the Nile. And it doesn't make a difference if Pharaoh is the most evil person in the world, which he was, and he got punished. But what will your mindset be? Will I be consumed with hatred? I will do acts of vengeance. Will I be consumed and become a vengeful personality? I will do acts that look similar to acts of hatred or of cruelty. But that does not mean I need to be a cruel person. And it's almost like, I think it's an unbelievable way in which the Midrash is saying that the Torah is teaching this. Can you imagine what the tension that Moshe has to have within his own personality to, on the one hand, be the representative of all of the injustice of the Jewish people, of the slavery and the torture and the suffering of the Jewish people, but being told, but do it in a respectful way. Not because Pharaoh necessarily deserves it, because that is the mindset that you should be in. You should have respect towards someone who is powerful. And it doesn't say because he deserves it, because of the kingship, because he is in a position of power. Not because you're scared of him. Of course you're not scared of Pharaoh. I'm with you. But does Pharaoh deserve to be gloated at? Yes, he does. But I don't want you to be the type of person who gloats. It's not just about being reciprocal. It's about what kind of human being you are. It's like the driver who gets who gets so annoyed at the driver next to him, and he makes a point of yelling out at the window at him. It's not doing anything. It's not achieving anything. You have a sense of right. But look at yourself. Look at the state of mind that you're in. So, and if we had more time, if you look in the Midrash brings several stories about Pharaoh, and it seems to be the exact opposite kind of approach. And I think the fundamental idea that the Midrash is doing here, both with the respect that Moshe is being told, as you destroy this country, it's almost as if someone said, this is ridiculous. You tell me to have respect as I'm decimating this land and bringing about the death, the destruction of their economy, the destruction of their land, and the death of all of their firstborn. Come on. What am I supposed to be, a hypocrite? No. You're not defined by the acts that you're not defined by the acts that you're sometimes forced to do. You are being forced to take these actions. They do not define you, and don't let them define you. And the focus over here is, who are you inside? What kind of personality is being created here? So therefore, Moshe, don't strike the Nile. Not because we care about how the Nile feels, because, it's like when you have a great memory of a place. A place that something amazing happened to you. It's not that the place is amazing, your connection to it, your thoughts about it. And if you go to, I don't know, your old school where you grew up, where you have fond memories, and you go and you suddenly mark it up or you vandalize it. This is not a statement about your school. This is about how you respect yourself and your education and your childhood and your teacher, or a million other things. And I think this is a fundamental idea, both in creating Moshe's leadership, but I think in general we understand that all the stories, or that there's an underlying themes, that as we see the redemption of the Jewish people out of Egypt, and we understand that all the stories, we try to see all the stories as ones not as just telling a historical event, but one that are molding the type of nation, the type of people that the Torah is trying to destine us to be. And this is one more, I think, very fundamental idea, one that is true both on the national level, when it comes to if we wanted to get more political, to, are the acts that the Jewish people are forced by history and by circumstance and by necessity, we're forced to do today in Israel. Do those acts by definition translate into defining who we are as a people? Some people say, well, if you do these types of acts, then that means you are bad. Then that means you are immoral. Not necessarily. Let's look in other areas of our life as a nation. Are we actually being immoral? Or are these acts of war, of defense, do they not define us? Let's look in other areas. Are we cruel? Are we racist? Are we whatever? Okay, but also on the individual level, to be focused on what do my actions, how will they impact my personality? To the degree that he's being told, as you are forced to take action against Pharaoh, be respectful towards him, so you do not become a hateful, vengeful person, even though he deserves every bit of it. But you don't want that to change who you are. And even though the water and the earth are inanimate objects, you do not want to attain a trait of ungratefulness. So you'll make sure it happens, but give it to Aaron to do. I think it's a phenomenally fundamental and deep idea, both on the personal level and on the national level, relevant to many things in our individual lives and our national lives. Yes, comment.
It almost sounds like the Torah is saying, don't do the actions, because if you do, those negative things can happen, as opposed to even if you do the actions, you can separate yourself.
I don't think the Torah is saying don't do the actions. The understanding is that sometimes these are both situations where action needs to take place. Pharaoh needs to be threatened. Pharaoh needs to be punished. You, Moshe, are the one to do it. It's a necessity. It's a command. You must do it. You must do this. But just because you have to do an act which is an act of that has negative consequences to it, therefore you need to be very careful for those actions not to define you. Does Pharaoh deserve to be respected? Probably not. But do you want these actions to turn you into a disrespectful person? So one could say, no, I'm only being disrespectful towards the bad guys. You're disrespectful enough to the bad guys, it impacts you. It impacts your personality.
It seems that it's a bit of a cop-out to say the act. I get the first part of being respectful to the Pharaoh, but we should be respectful of the Nile. So I won't be disrespectful. I'll ask my brother to be disrespectful. I don't want to kill anybody, but so I'll hire an assassin to do it.
No, meaning no, because I have a sentiment towards the Nile. It has nothing to do with the Nile. It's something to do with me. It has something to do with me. That I benefited from the Nile. I'm only alive not because the Nile did something for me. The Nile didn't do anything for me. But I look at the Nile, I think of the Nile, and I think, wow, I'm only alive because of the Nile. Not because the Nile did anything. It's not a sentient being with free choice. But what, do we not have affections towards objects and feelings towards objects? We do. It's not because it says anything about the objects. It says something about us. A holy book. A painting. What is a painting? It's nothing. But what is a painting that was handed down through the generations, painted by my great-grandmother? It's nothing. It's a piece of paper with a bunch of paint on it. What does it say about a person who would take that picture and say, you know what? I don't have enough wood for my cookout, so I'm going to use it for coals. Well, my great-grandmother is not going to know about it. She's dead already. She's not going to know. No one's going to know that I burnt the picture. What would you say about a person who takes an heirloom painting made by his great-grandmother in the shtetl in Poland that was smuggled through the Holocaust in her shoe, I don't know, whatever, and brought across and was saved the court case, and he says, well, my great-grandmother is dead already, I don't really like this type of art, so I'm going to use it as coals in my thing. I'm saying it's
just the opposite.
I'm saying, what would you say about that person? No, what would you say about the person? I'd say to that person, you're the most piggish person, and it's horrible. But it's an inanimate object.
Then I'm going to ask somebody else to burn it. I don't want to burn it because it's my grandmother.
Very good. What if? Okay, no. The analogy would be Ron is saying, well, then okay, you'll tell the other guy to burn it. What if? What? But no. But here's the analogy. The analogy is if it was cold in the house. It's really cold. And it's to the point where people could get sick, and the only thing left in the house that can give heat is this painting, and it has to be burnt, otherwise we're going to get freeze bites, we're going to die, we get hypothermia. So I would ask someone else to do it. That's the analogy. But if you were in that situation, you would say, okay, it has to be done, so I'm going to take my great-grandmother's painting that means so much to me, and I'm going to burn it. We're talking about necessity.
Can I ask something?
Please.
Maybe all this Midrash and they point on the work that Moshe has to make on his character for one reason only, because he has to give Torah to Jewish people. And almost all these mitzvahs that we have, if you look at them, it's to work on the character.
Right. So he's saying the reason this is so important for right.
People to work their character, you have to work on your character.
Right. And the reason this is so emphasized in Moshe is because of Moshe. Moshe is going to be the one to give Torah, and therefore he needs to embody these ideals. And then, in order to give us Torah that is supposed to help us work on our personalities. Absolutely. But the Midrashim emphasize it not only so Moshe, for us to learn about Moshe. The lessons about Moshe are lessons that the rabbis are trying to teach us about ourselves. And it's a phenomenal idea, I think, that if you think about it, that it has and there's a lot of examples of this, and not only Midrash, but even in Halacha. I won't go into them right now, where the emphasis is less on many times less on the action itself and the result itself, and a lot more on the mindset you were in. Meaning, you turn a light on Shabbat. You light a fire on Shabbat. It depends. Depends on the mindset. Depends on the intention. If it was done on purpose, or by accident, or unknowingly, completely different meaning to the action. Or out of necessity because you're about to die. The understanding is that actions in themselves many times are completely neutral. What gives actions the significance is the personality behind it. And therefore the focus is on the personality. The personality that's doing it and the effect that the actions have on the personality. Yes, question.
So I assume that there are more than 4 midrashim on this topic, right? So, and you can derive this sort of lesson from the collection of those 4 midrashim. But then, if you mix and match others, you will probably not get to the same conclusion. So, how much of this is an intended meaning of the verses versus the meaning that one particular reader derives from a collection of different sources? So, basically, if you have a pile of papers and you randomly draw papers from it, would you get to the same conclusion, meaning that there's an underlying big message that was encoded, versus this is just my interpretation of what it is, and others would disagree or would come up with a different explanation?
Look, that's a huge question. Don't worry, Alex. I'll repeat it. That is a huge question, which I will answer now very shortly, because it deserves its own class or even series of classes. The question was, look, I took 4 midrashim, which I myself admitted did not even come as one unit. Rather, I picked 4 midrashim from the same parsha, but 4 midrashim in order to create this, and out of it, this idea. Question was, to what degree is this just an idea that a little idea that happens to appear in a little few places, or is this really a fundamental idea that runs throughout all of Torah, or fundamental idea that appears again and again in a lot of different texts? And I think even further, to what degree could we honestly come and say whether this is an idea that the Torah itself is actually trying to say, versus some rabbi, be it Rabbi Tanchum or be it Rabbi Spitz, who just decides, I like this idea and I'm going to pick it. That's a very, very good question. And the only way to really answer that is, I'll give you 2 answers. One is, let's say it's not what the Torah is trying to say. Okay? The Midrash seems to be saying, this is what the Torah is saying. But even if it isn't, and even if you want to come and say, no, I don't think this is what the Torah itself is actually saying, there's no question that Rabbi Tanchum in the Midrash is saying it, and that in itself makes it a worthy thing to discuss and analyze. But the Midrash is definitely trying to depict that this is how it understands what the Torah is trying to say. Okay? The discussion of what is the Torah itself trying to say versus what we understand the Torah is trying to say is a big question that has to do with in general, with how, is there such thing as understanding the text itself? This is not only when it comes to studying Torah. This is when it comes to studying Lahavdil Shakespeare. Is there any meaning to asking? There's a big disagreement within the academic world of literature and studies of language. Is there such a thing as understanding? Is there any meaning to try to understand what the author of the original text even meant? So the traditional Jewish approach is absolutely. But if I were to give you an answer which is a more specific answer, in order to try to understand and try to see, is this just a little tiny idea that one person said, or is this an actual fundamental concept? For that, the only way to really answer that is to learn a lot of the same corpus and the same text, the same sources, and try to understand. Let's see which ideas are ideas that appear over and over again. Which ideas seem to be at the foundation of all the other little ideas, and to discover what are fundamental ideas and what are more specific and more local ideas. So I personally think that this idea is a very, very fundamental one. That I would actually prefer to call it a very foundational one. To the point, I brought one example, to the point that I find it to be very, very prevalent also when it comes to halacha. And many times, if you really want to see, when you want to see what really the Torah believes, the place where you want to really kind of test it the most, when it comes to the legal side, to the legal writings, because it's very easy to say a lot of nice philosophical ideas that there's no way to kind of test them. But when it comes to the legal system, that's where things get very real. And the legal system, any legal system, also, of course, has certain ideals and certain beliefs at the foundation of them, right? A legal system, a liberal democracy legal system will have at the foundation of it a concept, an ideal, a moral concept of equality. And based on that, you'll see a lot of laws. A system that does not have the idea of equality before the law will have different laws. So any legal system will always reflect certain ideals, morals, philosophies. So, and I brought one example, but there are many, many others that I think prove that the point of all of it, and that the focus of so much of Torah is what kind of human being is being created here, and what kind of human being is what is the character that is involved? What character are the actions expressing, and what is the effect of the actions on the character? Okay? Have a great week. Keep warm. Keep warm.
Yes, that's right.